famous piano player crashed his car in a snowstorm. It happened on the same evening he was scheduled to perform at the Lyric Opera House. The promoter had arranged for a limousine to take him from his apartment on Riverside Drive in Manhattan to the stage door in Baltimore. On a whim, he decided to rent a Jaguar and drive the 180 miles himself. It was in his nature to complicate things. Driving erratically at high speeds, he made it as far as Towson, Maryland, before skidding off the road into a ditch. I was a doctor on duty in the ER that frigid night when they wheeled him in. In the course of fulfilling my duties, I made my way to the private room he'd been assigned. As soon as I opened the door, he began to speak in his monotonous baritone. "A healer. How nice to meet you." He lay on the examination table, propped on his elbows in a threadbare tuxedo. His hands were long, with very broad, very flat fingers. There was a bruise above his right eyebrow, where his forehead had made contact with the steering wheel. Of course, a concussion was a possibility. "How do you feel? Are you experiencing any dizziness or headache?" He rambled on in a kind of ecstasy. "How do I feel? Our society provides no succor to the gifted, to the strange. The borders of my homeland are closed to me. I am an exile doctor. That is my condition." "Can we take off your coat, maestro?" I helped him out of his jacket. "I know you've already been examined by the nurse practitioner, but I'd like to take a look at you." I draped his coat over the chair next to the bed. "This may sound impertinent, but it would seem to me that society has been very generous in rewarding you for your gifts. In a hospital, monologists lurk behind every door. One takes for granted that patients will pour out their hearts or deliver blistering diatribes." "Are you referring to my audience, doctor? Those who applaud me? Those who buy my records?" Once again he leaned back on his elbows. He spoke with a certain vehemence. "They are my enemies. A gorilla can applaud. In fact, it was a gorilla that invented applause. Now I want you to sit up. Give me your hands, maestro. I want you to squeeze. Flattery is a form of malevolence." His grip was strong, as one might expect. I'd seen him a decade earlier at Carnegie Hall. As was his custom, he'd performed on a dark stage, half illuminated by a tight spotlight. That the tall, regal-looking maestro, with movie star looks, perfectly tailored clothes, a streak of white in his jet-black hair, didn't wish to be fully observed by the audience. He claimed he didn't want them to be distracted by his grimaces and flourishes, only added to his allure, to his star power. As he performed Liszt's La Campanella, he seemed to be perched on the lip of a volcano, or inside an exploding star, his hands whipping through the air like a murderer's hands. Since then, a diminution of some kind had taken place. Though I knew him to be in his early 50s, he seemed at least 10 years older. "Artistic vocation, doctor, is like an incurable illness. One has no choice but to accept it." He crossed his arms. "Just the same, it's no longer possible to write a symphony. We can write footnotes to great works, or compose bagatelles, perhaps, but the world has become a place of oppositions, paradoxes, approximations, and of course there are eyes everywhere. Isolation, seclusion is no longer possible. Unbutton your shirt, maestro." My stethoscope searched for the second intercostal space at the right sternal border. I auscultated his heart sounds. Then I moved on to the lungs. "Can I let you in on a secret, doctor?" I felt intense joy when the car began to skid, when I lost control. The sensation was familiar, yet I recognized it immediately, like hearing Gaspard de la Nuit on my 16th birthday. "Prima voltita." "Do you smoke, maestro?" He shook his head. "Picture it, doctor, the roar of an engine, headlights appearing on a twisting country road. My car swerves from the right lane to the left and back again. Instead of braking, I press on the accelerator." I began to suspect that the giddiness in his voice and mannerisms was due to something more than fatigue or mania. "We will have to keep you overnight, maestro, a mandatory precaution. Now, in order to rule out intracranial damage to your brain, it's essential to conduct one last assessment. Perhaps you've heard of it. It's called the swinging flashlight test." He shrugged. I shined my penlight into one eye to attain maximum pupil constriction, and quickly switched the light source to the other eye and back again. "When was the last time you had a physical, maestro?" "I see my physician socially, and talk to him on the telephone at least once a week. But no actual examinations, Maestro? The question was of no interest to him. Sometimes one says out of boredom, I'm going to kill myself, but then you go on. You perform the next date on the tour or record the next album. Then disaster of one kind or another strikes, and you find you're grateful for it, for any kind of extremis. Wisdom, as we all know, can only be gained through the experience of misery. He produced a folded piece of typewritten paper from a pocket of his tuxedo pants. These are the medications I'm taking, doctor. I follow a strict regimen. I glanced at the paper. A list of at least 20 sedatives, muscle relaxants, anxiolytics, anticonvulsants, and I returned it to him. You will be taken to a room. From what I understand, your doctor is on his way. I'll look in on you tomorrow, Maestro. He called after me. I believe in the numinous, doctor. Numen means to bow the head. I sit at the piano and bow my head. As I walked away, his was just another voice demanding recognition in the cacophony of the ER. It was distressing to think that he'd been watched, looked at, gazed upon by thousands of people, yet no one had bothered to notice that he suffered from anisocoria, a difference in the size of the pupils. Such a condition did not bode well for the maestro. I put my hands in the pocket of my lab coat and headed in the direction of the cafeteria. I would buy dinner and find an empty table and read, as I did every evening without fail. It was in my nature to muse over things. I found myself thinking that I could not agree with some of his assertions. I took my seat in the cafeteria. His genealogy of applause was not correct. Gorillas did not invent it. In fact, applause was first deployed by crowds of archaic men and women as a method of drowning out the cries of the sacrificial victim as the knife was raised and then driven home.